Amid the ruins, a dark-haired man cloaked in shadow stands still. This is the Shadow Labyrinth, the deepest pit of hell itself. He takes a step forward, crushed stones crunching beneath his boots. This is the final maze the Shadow World has cast upon humanity. Smoke coils through the air as he moves silently through the wreckage. Then, he halts, his eyes locked ahead. Towering before him is a monstrous beast of stone, wings spread wide, 3 glowing red eyes burning with fury. The dragon snarls, its voice a thunderous roar. How dare they! Flames swirl in its throat. A group of rebels stand strong, holding their weapons. In front of the dragon, some raise swords and others gear. The main character steps forward, his black-gloved hand stretched out. He remembers holding someone's hand. The man with dark hair has scars on his face. He looks at the dragon with strong determination and says it's over. The dragon roars, ready to fight. The hero boldly says he'll defeat the dragon and end this nightmare. Rocks and pieces of stone fly everywhere. Even with boulders falling, he stands tall. Glowing blue magic circles spin around him. He grips one tightly, his teeth clenched. Lightning sparks around his fist. He says the final scan of the magic is done. Then, clenching his hand, he yells that the dragon's magic is now sealed. A blonde man with a tied-back ponytail raises his sword and calls out to Desir, congratulating him with a cheer. A red-haired fighter, marked with a red tattoo across his face, rushes forward alongside the others, shouting that now is their moment. The group of heroes charges ahead, attacking the roaring dragon while yelling that it has to end here. Broken pieces fly through the air. The wounded dragon begins to rise into the sky, crying out, "No, this can't be real." Smoke pillars rise above a grassy field, glowing beneath an orange sky. Desire gazes at the creature with a sense of relief, thinking they can finally escape this nightmare. He stands near the enormous body of the fallen dragon, now lying on the ground like a giant slab of stone. The sky is filled with orange-lit clouds. Nearby, 6 heroes sit together in a circle on the rocky ground. Raffaello, the Knight of Light, grins widely and says they've all done a fantastic job. They've saved the world. Doneve Asilan, the muscular blonde king of Esteban, with a beast skull on his chest and markings on his face, glances around and asks why the purge message hasn't appeared yet. He reminds them that their mission in the Shadow World is to defeat the dragon. Raffaello taps his nose, thinking it over, and admits Donev is right. They should have been sent back to their world the moment the dragon was defeated. Another member of the group suggests that this place might be different from the usual Shadow Worlds, and maybe they just need to wait a bit longer. A hooded man sitting nearby quietly points out that only 6 people survived, out of 150 million. The survival rate is almost non-existent. The man speaking is Zod Exarian, the great sage and head of the Tower of Magic. His glasses are cracked under his hood as he comments on how absurd that number is. A girl in a pink dress looks at him sharply and tells him to stop with the useless math. It won't bring back the people they lost. She frowns and lifts her head, still trying to process everything, especially after hearing that nearly the entire magical population, 99%, is gone. Desert laughs softly and says that either way, they saved the world. That's what matters now. A blonde woman in armor, sitting a little distance away, narrows her eyes as she watches him. The girl in the pink dress chuckles and calls out to Raffaello, catching his attention. She says that without him, things would have been much harder. Raffaello waves it off with a smile, saying it was no big deal. Still smiling, he tells the group that as a paladin, he must protect everyone. Then he shifts the focus to Desir, saying that Desir played a more important role than he did. Doneve looks over and agrees. Without Desire, they never would have won. Desir rubs the back of his head, a little embarrassed, and quietly thanks them, asking them not to give him too much credit. The girl in pink glances at the sage, who is staring at Desir. Peering through his cracked glasses, the sage says he honestly thought Desir would have fallen much earlier. He knows Desir uses artifacts, but for someone who's only a third circle magician to analyze and seal the dragon's magic, that's beyond impressive. Even someone at the 7th circle level would struggle to pull that off. The others, still sitting in the group, begin to murmur in surprise. They wonder aloud how someone with that kind of ability is still only ranked as a 3rd circle magician. Desir glances at his companions, noticing their curious stares. They're eager to learn his secret. Interlocking his fingers, he smiles and says he's just a regular person, someone who never had access to proper training. If he had received a better education, he believes he could have saved even more lives. The sage, adjusting the hood over his head, replies that it's unfortunate. If someone like Desir had been part of the Tower of Magic, they would have given him full support and taught him everything. A quiet tension hangs in the air. Raffaello breaks it by clapping his hands and saying they should stop dwelling on the past. With a wink and a grin, he adds that plenty of people will be happy to see them return. Then he asks what everyone plans to do once they're back home. Doneve places a hand on his shoulder and says he'll visit the families of his fallen comrades, returning their belongings. Holding a bundle of gold and a bow, he says he'll always remember their brave sacrifices. The blonde girl in the pink dress stretches and says she'll head back to the Alliance of the Western Kingdoms. She plans to comfort the families of the lost, and, with a hopeful smile, says she's thinking of building a memorial shrine or temple to honor those who gave their lives here. A figure wearing long robes is carved deep into the stone's surface. With his arms crossed, the sage says he plans to search for a way to stop the Shadow Labyrinth from ever returning. If another shadow world of this scale appears again, he warns, it would mean destruction for their world. Raffaello glances upward and asks Azest, who's sitting on the stone, what she plans to do once they return. She doesn't respond, just looks at him silently, then turns away, leaving the others surprised. Raffaello grins and turns to Desir, asking about his plans next. He jokes that someone like Desir would be welcomed anywhere. The sage looks toward Desir too, and asks if he intends to go back to Haven Academy. Desir stays quiet, eyes fixed straight ahead. Suddenly, the dragon's eyes snap open. Desire leans forward, beginning to speak. Its red-orange eyes flare with intense light. The others watch in shock, confused by the sudden turn of events. Some leap to their feet, asking what's going on. Hadn't the mission been completed? They defeated the dragon, didn't they? The girl shouts, asking if the shadow world isn't finished after all. Doneve scowls, wondering if the dragon isn't truly dead. The sage, visibly shaken, yells that it's impossible. He had checked and confirmed the creature was dead. Azist stares ahead, her face unreadable. The sage pauses in thought, then lightly taps his glasses and says it could be the heart. The others glance at him, confused, and ask what he means. He explains that he once read something similar in an old book. The dragon's heart acts like a core engine, similar to a mana circle. It draws in large amounts of mana and spreads it throughout the creature's body. But when the dragon dies, the mana it stores can spiral out of control. He compares it to an overheated engine. The blonde man cuts in quickly, asking him to just get to the point. Desire stares forward with a grim expression and says that when an engine overheats, it explodes. The ground starts to tremble, and small rocks begin to jump across the surface. Someone turns to Desir, asking if he knew this would happen before killing the dragon. Desir replies that this is the first time in human history a dragon has ever been slain. The group stands up in alarm. The sage looks forward and says, the unstable mana will detonate. Its force will be equal to, or even greater than, that of a seventh circle spell. His eyes show a trace of sorrow as he adds that this isn't even true magic. There's nothing to analyze or control. All they can do now is brace for the worst. A massive glowing explosion bursts from the ground ahead, shaking everything as the terrified heroes look on. Raffaello clenches his jaw and says, this can't be happening. How could the world really be ending? The girl in the pink dress presses her hands together in prayer. Azest stands still, staring ahead as lightning sparks and flickers around her. Desire, his body lined with glowing white cracks, closes his eyes, thinking that this is truly the end. He glances down at his rough, worn hands, now fractured with white light. Then, unexpectedly, the cracks begin to shine. His hands heal before his eyes, becoming whole and unmarked. Desire stares at them in shock. Nearby, he notices a large pane of glass. As he peers into it, his reflection stares back. But he's no longer on the battlefield. He's somewhere else, calm, unfamiliar, and completely lost. Desire suddenly shouts without meaning to. People nearby turn toward him, confused by the outburst, and wondering why he looks so shocked. Desire stares at his hands, questioning himself. Wasn't I dead? He looks around. The hall is filled with people, and chandeliers made of magic stones glow brightly from above. The sharp sound of boots echoes through the space. Everyone's attention shifts in one direction, and Desir follows their gaze. A woman steps in with authority, stamping her foot before speaking. She announces cheerfully that she's happy to see everyone gathered. The woman, well-built and confident, is introduced as Professor Bridget of Hebrian Academy. She says she knows many of them have come with hopes of joining the academy, and she appreciates the effort they made to get there. Desire watches her, stunned, his mouth slightly open. Nearby, a few students whisper excitedly, recognizing her and commenting that she's their professor. Bridget, now standing behind the podium, calls out to the group at the back, saying she can hear every word and tells them to quiet down while she's speaking. She takes a breath to steady herself. Then, in a more serious tone, she tells them that while they've all come for the entrance exam, not everyone will make it through. The Shadow World, Bridget explains, won't be real. It's being specially created for the entrance exam. Desir covers his mouth with his hand, overwhelmed. What is going on? He wonders. It all feels unreal, like a dream. Bridget gives a cheerful wave and says the mentors assigned to them will explain the rest. She announces that the 172nd entrance exam for the year 3613 will begin in 2 hours. With a warm smile, she tells them they'll meet again soon. Desire, still in shock, rushes past the other students, their surprised faces blurring around him. He stops by a massive pillar, leaning against it, trying to catch his breath. This is the entrance ceremony, he realizes. Heavy breaths escape him as it sinks in. He's back at Hebrian Academy's entrance ceremony. He envisions the school's golden crest, marked with a large H, and recalls that Hebrian is the most prestigious magic academy on the continent. His eyes widen in disbelief. I already graduated from here over 10 years ago, he thinks. If it's the year 3613, then he must have entered the Shadow World in 3616. That means he spent 10 years trapped in the Shadow Labyrinth, and the world was destroyed by 3626. Closing his eyes, the memories rush back, his cloak stained with blood, hands trembling, the battlefield littered with bones, shattered weapons, and endless signs of war. Desire can't stop thinking that the last 10 years, all the suffering, the sacrifices, and everything they went through might have been for nothing. He leans forward, pressing his forehead into his hand, teeth clenched in frustration as silent tears begin to fall. The thought keeps voice echoing in his mind. Was it all truly in vain? Around him, the crowd continues to cheer and applaud, their joy filling the hall. But Desir's fingers dig tightly into the fabric of his shirt as tears stream down his face. Later, after the entrance announcement, he sits quietly on the steps outside the hall, head bowed. People walking past glance at him, whispering that he must be a commoner. It's sad, they say. With his eyes closed, Desir tells himself this is real. It's not some illusion or dream. He knows because he remembers everything. Clenching his fists, he silently thinks of all the faces, all the people from before. He buries his face in his hands. Just then, someone rushes up to him, calling out that they've been searching for him everywhere. He lifts his head. A girl leans in, holding a tablet, clearly annoyed. She scolds him, saying he wasn't at the meeting point, and asks where he's been hiding. The girl asks if he's Desir Herman. As Desir rises to his feet and apologizes, she turns away with a slight huff, pretending to be upset, and says it doesn't matter. Then she glances back at him and, softening, says she's glad to finally meet him. She introduces herself as Ladoria von Dorish, but tells him to just call her Ladoria. She explains that she's a second-year student at Hebrian Academy and has been assigned as his mentor. Desire nods politely, and she adds with a smile that she's looking forward to working with him. He watches her as she scans her tablet screen, her eyes focused. Ladoria is known as a top student, a brilliant fire element mage who has already reached the 6th circle. Throughout her time at Hebrian, she's consistently held the #1 spot in her class. She glances up and asks what's on his mind. Desire answers honestly, saying he's just feeling a bit nervous. Ladoria laughs and reassures him. It's only the entrance exam, and there's no need to be anxious. She adds that the artificial shadow world created for the test is nothing like the real one. Desire turns to her, asking if that's true. She nods and explains that it's simply a test to see if he's fit to join the ongoing fight against the actual shadow world. Looking back at her tablet, she asks casually if he's a commoner. Desire pauses, surprised by the question, but Ladoria quickly adds that it won't affect his chances of getting into the academy. The girl frowns slightly and says that if he's a commoner, he'll automatically be placed in the beta class, no matter how well he performs. In that class, she warns, students don't receive the same quality of education. Ladoria then begins explaining the harsh reality within Hebrian Academy. The system is divided. Nobles are placed in the alpha class, while commoners are pushed into the beta class, regardless of skill or potential. Even the most talented commoners face constant bias and are often held back simply because of their status. As they walk side by side down the corridor, Ladoria tells him not to worry about that just yet. First, he needs to get admitted. She then turns toward him and asks if he knows what the shadow worlds are. Desire responds that he does. Ladoria narrows her eyes, placing her hands on her hips as she stops in front of him. She questions whether he understands them fully. She explains that to fight against the shadow world, he'll need a complete understanding of what they are. The place is incredibly dangerous. Even the version created for the entrance exam, though not real, is still filled with risks. Desire nods, watching her closely. The girl raises her index finger and says that, just to be sure, she wants to ask him a few questions. Her first question, what exactly is the shadow world? Desire answers without hesitation. The shadow world, he explains, is a type of parallel dimension, and it's considered the greatest threat humanity has ever encountered. One appears every year. While their numbers seem endless, each one follows its own unique set of rules. Some are relatively harmless, but others are extremely dangerous. These worlds are shaped by events and incidents from the past. The magical community has classified them into 10 levels, ranked by historical complexity. The higher the level, the more intricate and deadly the world becomes. The true danger of the shadow worlds, he continues, lies in their ability to consume reality. The land they claim becomes swallowed in thick black mist, and no one truly knows what happens inside. One thing is certain, nothing living survives in territory overtaken by a shadow world. As Desire finishes speaking, Ladoria stares at him, clearly impressed. A chill runs down her spine. His voice is steady and serious as he ends his explanation, saying that this is exactly why clearing shadow worlds is so critical. The girl frowns slightly, crossing her arms over her chest, before letting out a short cough. She opens her eyes and raises 2 fingers. Calmly, she explains that there are 2 main powers that oversee the management of shadow worlds. The first is the League of the Western Kingdoms. The second is Hebrian Academy. These 2 forces often compete, racing to clear shadow worlds and gather soul stones in the process. As Academy members, she adds, they'll be directly involved in that struggle. Quietly, she notes to herself that there's a third, lesser-known faction, but it's still too early for him to learn about them. As she turns and walks ahead, she asks if he knows what it truly means to clear a shadow world. Desire, following closely behind, replies that he does. He explains that shadow worlds are alternate realities, where events from the past replay themselves. They emerge randomly across the globe, and there's only one way to shut them down. For instance, if a shadow world is based on a historical war where one side was defeated, the task might be to change the outcome, to win the war this time. Each shadow world has its own scenario and mission, and once the objective is achieved, the world is considered cleared. He adds that everything now revolves around resolving these shadow worlds, and both the League of the Western Kingdoms and Hebrian Academy are central players in that mission. The girl glances at him, slightly surprised, then smiles, and says he's not bad. He clearly knows the basics, so they can move on to the next part. As they approach a tall, multi-story building with golden railings, she tells him they've reached their destination. This is the academy's main building. Ladoria runs ahead to the glass sliding doors and holds up a purple student card. A glowing seal appears, followed by a mechanical voice confirming her identity. "Welcome, Sixth Circle Magician Ladoria." The doors slide open. She smiles and steps inside, with Desir calmly following behind. They enter a large open hall with high ceilings. Ladoria moves ahead excitedly, almost running. All around them are students chatting and gathering, even on the upper floor. Desire takes a moment to look up, observing the animated conversations and the banners fluttering gently, each one marked with the Academy's emblem. His expression remains composed, but there's a quiet sadness behind his eyes. Ladoria notices his distant gaze and quickly picks up on the fact that the scene isn't impressing him much. Desire gives a slightly awkward smile and says he's just seen a building like this before. Ladoria laughs, assuming he's just being playful. They continue walking down a wide hallway lined with large windows on one side and blue banners hanging on the other. Without warning, Ladoria comes to a halt, her expression turning sour as she looks ahead. The sound of footsteps echoes down the corridor. A young man steps into view, smirking as he crosses his arms. A girl trails behind him. With a mocking tone, he greets Ladoria. Desire, standing just behind her, leans in and asks if she knows him. She replies with a sigh that the guy is Elheim, a water element mage and someone she finds unbearable. He's the complete opposite of her in every way. Not only are their magic types incompatible, but their personalities clash just as much. Their relationship, she says bluntly, has always been terrible. Desire chuckles and remarks that it seems like she and Elheim don't exactly get along. Ladoria snaps back, clearly annoyed, saying, "Of course not. Elheim is arrogant, full of himself, and exactly the kind of person she can't stand." The blue-haired young man leans his head lazily on his hand, smirking at them before throwing a smug grin her way. He jabs at her, saying she must have taken forever to arrive, thanks to her short legs. Ladoria shoots him a sarcastic smile and retorts that he's just as irritating as ever. She adds that she's always wondered where he comes up with such nonsense. With a wicked grin, Elheim fires back, saying it's funny hearing that from such a pathetic fire element mage. Ladoria lifts her chin proudly and reminds him, "Didn't that so-called pathetic mage beat you just last month?" His expression turns cold. He scoffs, saying she doesn't know the difference between losing and letting someone win. That's why she'll always be behind him. Ladoria keeps smiling, but her anger is simmering beneath the surface. She warns that if this is all he's got, maybe he should consider dropping out of the academy altogether. They face each other like two predators circling, tension thick in the air, one burning with fury, the other coiled and venomous like a snake. Elheim finally frowns, exhales, and regains his composure. Looking toward Desir, he guesses aloud that the guy must be her new mentee. Desir, standing quietly behind Ladoria, confirms it with a polite nod and says hello. With one hand resting on his hip, the blue-haired man remarks that at least Desir knows how to be polite, unlike Ladoria. He then asks Desir for his name, and Desir answers calmly. Elheim pulls out his tablet, lets out a low chuckle, and says he'll have a look. A mischievous grin spreads across his face as he glances at the screen. He then asks, almost mockingly, if Desir is a commoner. Without waiting for a reply, he waves his hand dismissively and turns to Ladoria, saying she's stuck mentoring a lowly commoner. He adds that it suits her, though it's unfortunate. This won't even be a real competition. Ladoria snaps back, her voice rising as she demands to know what he's getting at. She glares at him, asking him to explain what he means. Still laughing, Elheim holds out his tablet and tells her she didn't bother to check the group assignments. Displayed on a blue screen are the names Desir Herman, Azest King's Crown, Romantica ERU, and Treviri Tychus, all listed under the same team. With a smug look and raised brows, Elheim gives her a pitying glance and says her mentee doesn't stand a chance. Ladoria crosses her arms tightly, clearly irritated, and says, "Who knows? Maybe my mentee will come out on top in the end." Elheim scoffs and tells her not to be ridiculous. He says there's no way a commoner could defeat his mentee, someone who happens to be a magic knight. Ladoria's eyes widen in shock. She didn't expect that. Elheim waves casually, smirking, and tells her that if she doesn't believe him, she should ask the person herself. Nervously, Ladoria swallows and turns to the girl. "What's your name?" she asks. The young woman steps forward, calmly approaching the stunned Ladoria. Desire watches with a faint, knowing smile. The girl introduces herself as Azest King's Crown. Ladoria's jaw drops in disbelief. "Unbelievable," she mutters. Holding up her tablet, she explains in awe that Azest is an ice element magic knight, a user of arcane magic, a third circle magician, and her swordsmanship already exceeds the pawn rank. Elheim stands back, grinning like a smug predator, clearly enjoying Ladoria's reaction. Ladoria, thinking to herself, admits silently that this girl is a prodigy. As that realization sinks in, she turns to glance at Desir, and it hits her. He doesn't stand a chance against someone like Azest. Elheim waves dismissively and laughs, casting a sly, mocking glance at Ladoria. "What happened to all that confidence?" he sneers. Chuckling to himself, he walks past the fuming girl. As he moves by Desir, he pauses and offers him some so-called advice. With a dark expression, he tells Desire that even if he somehow manages to pass the entrance exam, he'll just end up dumped in the worthless beta class, a fate worse than failing altogether. Desire silently watches Elheim and Azest walk away. Beside him, Ladoria is still seething, shaking her fist in frustration. Desire's gaze shifts to Azest, and for a moment, his expression softens. He stares at her in a daze, a small, dreamy smile forming on his lips. Midoriya, still burning with anger, kicks a pebble across the floor. Just then, a voice echoes through the hall. A mechanical announcement plays from a rectangular speaker on the wall, stating that the entrance exam will begin shortly and all candidates should head to the testing area. Still annoyed, Midoriya turns to Desire and demands to know why he's smiling after everything that just happened. Desire doesn't answer directly. Instead, with a calm voice, he says it's time for them to go too. The examinees gather inside a large hall, its centerpiece a circular structure surrounded by ornate golden doors spaced along the walls. Desire's attention fixes on one of the doors, his eyes scanning the intricate seals carved into it. Crossing his arms, he rests his chin in his palm and glances around thoughtfully, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. As he remains lost in thought, a sharp female voice interrupts him, telling him to stop fidgeting and asking if he's trying to make a scene. The girl stands a few steps away, looking visibly annoyed, with two other candidates behind her. Desire's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes her. He suddenly shouts her name and rushes forward, grabbing her by the shoulders. In a rush of emotion, he exclaims that she's alive, asking if she's okay and whether she's hurt. Romantica, completely thrown off by the sudden outburst, yells back in confusion, demanding to know what he's talking about. Realization dawns on Desire. His eyes narrow slightly, and he mutters a quiet curse, realizing he's just made a scene. Flustered, he scratches his head awkwardly. Romantica steps back, wrapping her arms around herself, clearly startled and unsure of what to make of his behavior. Desire quickly bows his head and apologizes, explaining that he's a little disoriented right now, and that's why he acted so strangely. The girl snaps at him, calling him a commoner and telling him to be more careful. Desire presses his lips together, wearing a confused expression. He didn't expect to see her again, and now that she's right in front of him, he can't hide his emotions. As he watches the irritation on her face, a quiet thought forms in his mind. I'm just glad she's alive and well. He silently wonders if she has any idea what truly happened. Memories flash through his mind, how losing her had shattered him, how he had screamed, cried, and sunk into hopeless grief. But now, standing here, he realizes something important. This moment is from before everything fell apart. He's certain of it. He's been sent back. This is a second chance. His expression hardens. His brow tightens as a shadow passes over his face, and with quiet resolve, he makes a vow. I won't let her die this time. He clenches his fist, filled with unwavering determination. The candidates lift their heads as a chime echoes through the hall. A voice crackles from the overhead speakers, announcing that the examination trial for Group D has been confirmed. The voice goes on to explain that the group will be transported into an 18th level shadow world, specifically a race event set on the Arenstar Plains. The goal, reach the finish line first. The finish line is located 8 kilometers from the starting point. The rules are then made clear. Magic use and attacking other participants are permitted. However, thanks to the student safety system, pain will be reduced by 80%. The voice warns that any student who gives up or suffers damage equivalent to a fatal injury in the real world will be immediately ejected from the shadow world. As the candidates gather near the golden door, a student named Treviri turns to Romantica and strikes up a conversation. He remarks that their group got lucky. Rumor has it that Group B's challenge involves fighting trolls. He points out that their task is a competitive one, meaning they'll be going up against each other instead of monsters. Romantica responds with a smirk, saying that since the Magic Knight and Desire, whom she dismissively calls a loser, don't stand a chance, it'll come down to just the two of them. They exchange quick wishes of good luck. Suddenly, the host's voice announces that the gates are about to open and instructs the participants to form a line. The 4 examinees position themselves in front of the golden doors, which begin to glow with a brilliant white light. Moments later, their bodies fade from view, reappearing on a vast green plain beside a flowing river. A voice echoes overhead, announcing that the candidates have officially entered the Shadow World, a race trial set on the Arenstar Plains. It states that the competition will begin in 3 minutes and instructs all participants to take their positions at the starting line. The 4 contestants step up to a glowing blue line, each preparing in their way. Desire tilts his head slightly, casting a glance at Azest, who stands nearby with a calm, unreadable expression. Trying to be polite, he greets her nervously. She doesn't respond. Her half-lidded eyes remain fixed straight ahead, unmoved. Desire wonders to himself if she too has returned somehow, but as always, he finds her impossible to read. Then, out of nowhere, her voice cuts through the silence, startling him. Without even turning her head, she says bluntly that he's weak. Desire freezes, caught off guard. So, this is what I get for hoping she'd be different, he thinks to himself. In a low voice, he replies that he already knows. Azest doesn't let up. Still looking forward, she tells him he's wrong. He doesn't truly understand just how weak he is. The host's voice rings out, announcing that the race will begin in 10 seconds. Participants are asked to prepare themselves. Desire stands calmly, his expression steady. Azest gives a small nod, showing no hint of emotion. Romantica's eyes glow with excitement as she smiles and clenches her fists. Treviri wears a confident grin. With a final call, the announcer signals the start of the race. All 4 contestants burst forward from their positions. Azest immediately surges ahead, with Treviri close behind. She launches off the ground with incredible force, kicking up a burst of dust. The sudden blast of dirt hits both Desire and Romantica square in the face as the 2 front runners pull away. Romantica coughs and shouts angrily, yelling at them to stop kicking up so much dust. In the middle of her outburst, she accidentally steps on something in the grass. A tiny brown creature wearing a green hat. The little being, a leaf imp, tumbles backwards onto the ground. As she runs, the girl glances back with a grin and apologizes, commenting on how adorable the little creature is. Hearing her remark, Desir mutters under his breath that she's always had a weakness for anything cute. Her expression immediately shifts, eyebrows twitching. She spins around with an irritated smirk and yells, demanding to know if he thinks he knows her. She snaps that he should focus on the race instead. Desir replies that he'd love to, but at their current pace, they'll both end up eliminated. Romantica shoots him a fiery glare, her eyes wide with frustration, and screams at him to shut up and stop acting like they're close. In response, Desir simply smiles, soft and sincere. That only sets her off more. She starts swinging her fists in his direction, shouting at him, and asking what's wrong with him, and why he keeps smiling like a weirdo. Calmly, Desir answers that he's just really happy. It's been a long time. Romantica doesn't understand what he means, but she stays visibly annoyed. Suddenly, she stretches her hand forward, declaring that she was saving this move for a more dramatic moment, but she's going to use it now. She tells Desir to watch closely and says this is something a commoner like him could never achieve, the power of a second circle mage. As the two dashes toward the edge of a green forest, the wind begins to whip around them. With force and pride, she casts her spell, Gusted Wind. Her brows knit in focus as a glowing magic circle forms beneath her outstretched palm. A man stands holding a tablet, announcing that groups A and C have just finished their exams, leaving only groups D and F still in progress. He adds that so far, everything is proceeding normally. No unexpected issues have come up. On the table in front of him rests a blue orb, glowing faintly atop a red cloth. It's a magical device used to monitor the candidates during the test. Around a large conference table, several individuals sit watching holographic blue screens displaying the ongoing evaluations. One of them remarks that this year's group of students is particularly impressive. Another chimes in, saying last year's batch was strong too, but this time there's even a magic knight among the participants. Someone comments that she's the perfect example of a noble, someone who embodies everything a true aristocrat should be. Other notes that she's assigned to Group D, which also includes a commoner. A few of the observers laugh quietly, agreeing that this matchup will be anything but forgiving. Bridget, sitting among them, says nothing. She simply smiles to herself, calm and composed. Back on the racecourse, the green canopy of trees blurs past as the two lead participants dash forward at full speed. Treviri, running side by side with Azest, narrows his eyes in focus. His breath comes heavy and fast, but he's confident. This race should be his. In his mind, a magician could never outpace a knight in a pure sprint. Resolute, he clenches his fists and exhales sharply, pushing himself harder as he charges through the forest trail. He steals a glance at Azest, who's keeping pace beside him, her breathing controlled. He can't help but think, this girl is something else. A magic knight with this kind of stamina is rare. Without breaking stride, Treviri glances over his shoulder, curiosity flickering across his face. Where are the other two? He wonders. Suddenly, a gust of wind kicks up, scattering green leaves around him. He quickly snaps his gaze forward, his expression shifting. His brows knit and a shadow falls over his face. That wind. It's not natural. Out of nowhere, a powerful gust of wind barrels toward him. Treviri instinctively raises his arms to shield himself as the blast slams into him, pushing him backward with immense force. He grits his teeth and crosses his arms tightly over his chest, straining against the pressure. The strength of the magic catches him off guard. He quickly suspects that Romantica is behind it. Thinking fast, he drives the tip of his sword into the ground, realizing she's likely trying to send him flying all the way back to the starting line. Gripping the hilt tightly, he plants his feet and holds on, using the blade as an anchor. A confident smirk spreads across his face. With all his gear, he weighs over 200 pounds, and as long as his sword is embedded in the ground, there's no way he'll be blown away so easily. If this is all Romantica's got, he thinks, then she's going to have to do better than that. Treviri's eyes widen in surprise as Azest suddenly surges past him at incredible speed. With one hand, she begins to draw her sword mid-run. In a swift motion, she slashes through the air, slicing straight into the wind. He watches, stunned, as she charges directly into the powerful gust, blade in hand. Is she really cutting through the wind? He wonders, unable to look away. Azest's breathing is heavy, her expression focused beneath half-lowered eyelids. With each step forward, she continues slashing at the air, forcing her way through the turbulent currents. Treviri watches her closely, a puzzled look on his face. His brow lifts, sweat trickling down his cheeks. So, this is what a magic knight looks like in action, he thinks, both impressed and wary. Still, he figures that such relentless effort must be draining her. Better to wait it out, he reasons, and move once the wind settles. Suddenly, Treviri spots several trees being ripped from the ground, their roots exposed as the violent wind tears through the forest. His jaw tightens, and he scowls in frustration, realizing this was Romantica's plan all along. Of course, he thinks bitterly. This is exactly what she was aiming for. In his mind, he can already see her wicked grin. One particularly massive tree is torn free by the force of the wind. Treviri's face twists with rage, and to his own surprise, tears begin to stream from his eyes. He throws his head back, mouth wide open, and lets out a furious scream, cursing Romantica at the top of his lungs. A split second later, a loud crash echoes through the forest, just as the uprooted tree slams into him. Azest lifts her gaze to the sky, noting calmly that the wind has stopped. At that moment, the host's voice echoes through the air, announcing that Treviri Reverie Tychus has been eliminated from the shadow world. Only 3 participants remain. Meanwhile, Romantica and Desire continue sprinting across the open field. Desire glances at her. She's clenching her fists tightly, her face drawn into an irritated scowl. Muttering under her breath, Romantica grumbles that it's a shame the Magic Knight managed to survive. She suddenly speeds up, cutting in front of Desire and blocking his path. "Your turn now," she declares, fixing him with a sharp look. Desire blinks, confused. She flashes a quick wink and taps her cheek with one finger. With a mockingly sweet tone, she tells him that since she's such a generous person, and since he's just a commoner, she's willing to give him a chance to surrender. After all, she adds, he probably doesn't want to deal with what's coming. Desire responds with a calm smile, saying he'll have to decline her offer. Romantica lets out a satisfied sigh and closes her eyes, saying that was actually a smart choice, until the meaning of his words hits her. Her eyes snap open in shock, and she screams in disbelief, her face filled with outrage. She yells at him, asking if he's lost his mind, and if he somehow missed what her magic just did. Staring at his still smiling face, she barks at him to wipe that grin off immediately. Lowering her head, sparks of electricity begin to flicker around her. Her voice drops to a growl as she mutters that she's giving him one last chance. At the very least, she says, he won't die here. With a sharp motion, she waves her hands, and glowing blue magic circles form all around her. Her eyes narrow, glowing with intensity, as she locks onto Desire. With a cold, determined tone, she warns him she's not going to hold back. She wants to see just how much punishment he can take. In that instant, additional magic seals materialize around Romantica as she clasps her hands together, activating her Windstrike spell. With a fierce shout, beams of concentrated wind magic burst from the seals, launching straight toward Desire. Still smiling faintly, Desire calmly waves his hand in response. Moments later, a powerful explosion erupts. Chunks of earth are blasted into the air, scattering in all directions as the ground shakes from the impact. Standing within the rising cloud of dust, Romantica narrows her eyes. That was a second circle spell cast at point-blank range, she thinks. She doubts someone like him, a first circle magician at best, could have withstood it. She lifts a hand to her face, grinning behind it. This is kind of fun, she admits to herself, but it's time to finish this. Desire suddenly appears behind her and casually remarks that she launched her spell right after the condensation phase, direct and immediate. Romantica spins around, eyes wide in shock. Raising a hand to his mouth, Desire lets out a light cough, clearing the dust from his throat. He then calmly adds that the spell she used, both this one and the previous, are truly impressive for a second circle mage. Resting both hands on his hips, he flashes a broad, confident smile. Romantica just stares at him, completely stunned, her mouth hanging open and one eyebrow raised in disbelief. Desire rests a hand thoughtfully on his chin, analyzing her technique. While the spell itself was powerful, he notes that she focuses too much on speed and neglects proper airflow control, causing her accuracy to drop significantly. With a small adjustment to the spell's trajectory, he manages to throw it off course just enough to avoid being hit. Romantica stares at him in disbelief, eyes wide and jaw slack. Stammering, she demands to know what he just did. Desire places a hand on his chest, where a faint, red, translucent energy ring glows around his wrist. He calmly explains that he used inverse operations to neutralize her magic. He glances down at the fading ring, his expression shifting to mild curiosity as it begins to disintegrate. Romantica suddenly charges at him, fist raised in frustration, shouting that he's being ridiculous. There's no way a first circle magician could pull that off, but Desire meets her glare with calm honesty. "I'm not lying," he says. Romantica grits her teeth, fear flashing in her eyes as it dawns on her. Her spell was dismantled by a commoner. She knows that only someone with a deep mastery of magical theory and runes could perform an inverse operation. Normally, that kind of maneuver requires the caster to be from a significantly higher magical circle than the one being countered. She raises a brow, staring at Desire in disbelief. How could someone like him possibly manage that? Her fists tighten again and multiple glowing seals form around her. Her expression grows darker. "This is where the fun ends," she shouts. She insists that her earlier attack only missed because of chance, and that he was just lucky. Her face twisted in anger, she yells that she'll never allow herself to lose to someone like him. Focusing her energy on him, she growls that she refuses to be defeated by a first circle mage. Suddenly, sharp glowing spikes emerge from the surrounding seals, linked together by long, ethereal chains. With a forceful motion, she thrusts her hand forward, and the chain projectiles shoot toward Desire. Desire calmly waves his hand, a faint smile tugging at his lips as 2 glowing rings form around him. He tells her to pay attention, explaining that with just a slight adjustment to certain points in the airflow, this is what happens. As he shifts his hand to the side, all the sharp tips veer off course and slam harmlessly into the ground, none of them touching him. Romantica reaches out instinctively, her eyes wide in shock and disbelief. Desire snaps his fingers, and the glowing rings around his wrist fade into nothingness. He tells her gently that with better control, she has the potential to become a truly great magician one day. Romantica grits her teeth again, slowly lowering her hand. This is insane, she thinks. If he really is using inverse operations, limitations. Then he's operating on a level far beyond her own. Desir steps forward, his voice steady, as he says it's time to bring this to an end. His eyes settle calmly on Romantica, as he adds that there's someone he absolutely has to defeat. Romantica stares at him in shock, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turn white. She shuts her eyes, and tears begin to form at the corners. With a pained scream, she shouts that there's no way he could beat her. Desir halts, his gaze dropping to her trembling hands as she cries out, insisting that this is magic, and he's not supposed to be able to use it. If she keeps attacking, she swears she will defeat him. He watches her with a puzzled expression. In his mind, he acknowledges her strength, remarkable for a first year. Maybe only one student in the entire class could actually stand a chance against her. He closes his eyes and lowers his head. It's still not enough, he thinks. The memory resurfaces, holding Romantica's lifeless body in his arms, his cries echoing in despair. But then a faint smile touches his lips. That future, he thinks, will never happen again. As Desir watches the girl standing before him, fists clenched in frustration, he recognizes her potential. She can grow stronger, he thinks. But for that to happen, he needs to be the one to stay ahead of her. He halts her in place by calmly calling her name. Then, with a faint smile, he tells her she's made 3 critical mistakes. Lifting one finger, Desir says that even though he may be weak, he can still cast magic. He points directly at her. Then, shifting to his second finger, he tells her she was never his real target. He closes his eyes and holds up 3 fingers as he begins to explain her final error. Romantica's eyes widen as Desire starts chanting a spell. She watches in disbelief as 2 glowing seals appear at his feet. He activates a sliding spell, ice magic fused with momentum, and then casts Grease, a basic first circle physical spell designed to eliminate friction. She stares, mouth slightly open. Grease? It's one of the most basic utility spells, usually not suited for combat. Why now, she wonders. Then it hits her. Her eyes go wide. Planting her feet firmly into the grass, she realizes what he's attempting. He's trying to make her lose her footing. Her body tenses as she braces herself. But to her confusion, the ground beneath her remains steady. The grass doesn't feel slippery at all. She looks up at Desir, suspicion flickering in her gaze. Did he mess up the spell? She thinks. Desire continues, ready to reveal the 3rd mistake. Smiling, he lifts his index finger and says she seems to have forgotten one important thing. This isn't a magic duel. They're in a race. Then he asks her a simple question. With a mischievous grin, he spreads his arms and asks, "Where exactly do you think I cast the Grease spell?" Romantica stares at him, confused, mumbling that the spell must have failed. It clearly didn't activate. Desir covers his mouth with one hand, feigning disappointment, his expression darkening. "Wrong answer," he says quietly. Romantica snaps at him, demanding that he stop looking at her like that. Desir rests a hand on his chest and calmly explains that the Grease spell wasn't cast on the ground, but on himself. He shoots her a subtle, questioning look, pausing for a moment before she responds, still unsure. And what difference does that make? He tilts his head slightly, then asks, "Have you ever heard of the law of action and reaction?" Romantica scowls, her voice rising as she yells that, of course she knows the law of action and reaction. Desir watches her confused expression and calmly asks, "Then tell me, what happens if someone gives me a push from behind?" The brown-haired girl responds with a huff, "You'd move forward, obviously." Standing firm, Desir follows up with another question. "And what if the push came with incredible force, like the blast of a powerful explosion?" Her expression shifts. Confusion turns to concern as she begins to realize what he's about to do. She opens her mouth to stop him, but it's too late. Desir waves his hand, casting a spell. A fireball erupts behind him, glowing with intense red-orange light, crackling in the air. Romantica stiffens, fists clenched and body tensed. She leans forward, panic in her eyes, shouting that he's going to get himself seriously hurt. At that velocity, she warns, he could crash into something, or worse. Desire stretches out his arms as if embracing the wind, a soft smile on his face as he calls her name. Then, gently, he reminds her of what she told him not long ago. Romantica's expression shifts to fear, her brows knitting as the memory hits her. She had told him it was impossible to die in the shadow world. Just then, Desir steadies himself, the fireball flaring behind his back as he prepares for launch. He calmly states that in this kind of situation, the basic laws still apply. A blinding flash bursts into the air as the spell activates. Desir blasts forward, leaving a trail of dust swirling in his wake. Romantica stumbles as the shockwave knocks her off balance. Her eyes go wide, and she crashes into the grass with a soft thud. Blades of grass flutter in front of her as she lies there, stunned. Staring after him, she mutters in disbelief, "Where did this lunatic even come from?" Far ahead, Azest is already nearing the finish line. Without warning, she glances back over her shoulder, sensing someone rapidly closing the distance. Her instincts flare. She plants her boots firmly, pivots sharply, and thrusts her hand forward, ready to intercept whoever is coming. Then Desir appears, racing toward her at full speed. Azest narrows her eyes as she recognizes him. It's the weakling, she notes, surprised. Azest chooses not to engage, pressing forward while Desir stays close behind. Her lips tighten in focus as she continues to run, quietly considering the possibility that he might try to strike from behind. Up ahead, a glowing blue line comes into view. It's the finish line, just within reach. But instead of crossing it, she makes a decision. Now's the time to face him head on. She briefly thinks of Romantica. She's strong, Azest admits, but since she's not here, that must mean he defeated her. Her gaze sharpens. She decides to go all in. Extending her arm forward, she begins casting a spell. A glowing blue magic circle materializes around her her outstretched hand as she prepares a powerful attack. Her light brows furrow in focus as the spell nears completion. Above Desire, a series of magic seals appear in the air, woven together by fine strands of blue energy. He lifts his head just as the formation completes, eyes going wide in surprise. He stares up, studying the intricate pattern of seals forming overhead. Aizest stands firm, her arm extended as a radiant magic circle glows at her fingertips. Her voice is steady as she declares that whatever trick he used to defeat the other girl won't work on her. Desire clenches his fists but doesn't slow down. As he rushes forward, he acknowledges her skill. To cast that many spells in such a short time is impressive, he admits silently. Still, a confident smile creeps across his face. But she's underestimating me. In one swift motion, Desire closes his eyes and then snaps them open. Small red seals materialize in front of his right eye, marking the activation of his analysis spell. Under his gaze, the glowing blue seals floating around Aizest begin to shimmer faintly with red highlights. His eyes scan quickly, locking onto another cluster of seals. Those too begin to glow red as his analysis deepens. The structural analysis of 180 spells is complete, he says aloud. I now have access to 180 magic rune links. Aizest's eyes widen in disbelief, and she instinctively leaps backward, gripping her sword tightly as Desire charges toward her without hesitation. Aizest watches him carefully, realizing with unease that his analysis speed is on par with that of a 6th circle mage. She lifts her hand, thinking that if she gives him even a few more seconds, he'll be able to decipher her entire arsenal. With a grim expression, she points her palm at Desire, blue lightning flickering around her fingers. This ends now, she declares. Desire keeps moving, seals still spinning before his eyes. With a focused glare and furrowed brow, he suddenly opens his mouth and shouts the spell for trajectory correction. A massive blue blast erupts in front of him, sending a column of smoke billowing into the air. From within that smoke, glowing blue arrows shoot forward, piercing through the haze. They strike Desire, one in his arm, another grazing near his neck, and several more embedding into his legs. Surrounded by white mist and wounded, Desire presses forward, stepping toward Aizest, who now has magical seals forming behind her. Her lips tighten, and her brows draw together. She watches him closely, wondering, is this how he managed to defeat Romantica too? Standing amidst the debris, Desire appears battered and bloodied, his clothing torn and his stance unsteady. Aizest narrows her eyes, realizing what he's done. He only redirected the arrows that were aimed at his vital points, letting the rest hit non-lethal areas. With magical seals glowing behind her, she lifts her head and calculates the situation. There's roughly 200 meters between them, and she still has 21 magic arrows at her disposal. Her gaze locks onto Desire, who stands in front of thick, swirling dust clouds, gripping his injured left arm. Several blue seals float around him, and she notices with surprise he's taken control of 4 of them. Her brow tightens, frustration flickering across her expression. If I can't win with numbers, she thinks, then I'll overwhelm him with sheer force. She whispers to herself that her strategy needs to change. Behind her, the seals begin to merge, fusing together into glowing blue spheres. They swirl, pulse, and finally condense into a massive radiant circle shining with brilliant energy. Desire plants his feet firmly into the ground, his face calm despite the pain. Clutching his wounded arm, he watches the transformation unfold. Looks like Aizest has finally decided to start thinking, he muses. Aizest lifts her sword high, and multiple bursts of blue light shimmer around her. Desire offers a faint smile, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. She's strong, he thinks, but she's made the wrong move. Without hesitation, Aizest thrusts her hand forward, unleashing a massive surge of energy, sharp and focused, directed straight at him. In response, Desire swings his uninjured arm, activating the 4 blue seals he previously took under his control. One magic arrow launches from them, and he bolts forward. The arrows collide with Aizest's attack, triggering a massive explosion. But within moments, her magic overpowers his defense and continues surging forward. Desire keeps running, undeterred, 3 red seals spinning near his eye. His brows furrow in concentration. He raises 2 fingers and commands the system. Begin analysis. Instantly, part of Aizest's magical stream glows red, its structure unraveling under his gaze. Still in motion, Desire clenches his fist, opens his mouth wide, and shouts the spell to adjust the course. The portion of energy now under his control veers off, curving to intercept and redirect the core of Aizest's powerful spell. A massive explosion erupts as the 2 forces collide, sending up thick clouds of dust and smoke that blanket the area. Near the glowing finish line, Aizest turns around quickly, gripping her sword and reacting in shock to the sudden turn of events. Out of the smoky haze, Desire bursts forward, his figure emerging with force. Aizest clenches her teeth, gripping her sword tighter as she realizes what he's doing. He's using the blast's momentum to launch himself ahead. She reaches for her weapon, starting to draw it, but it's too late. Desire surges past her, battered and bloodied, his focus fixed on the glowing blue line just ahead. Aizest's eyes widen as she turns sharply toward the finish, finally understanding he never intended to defeat her. He was aiming to win the race. With one final leap, Desire crosses the line. Breathing heavily, blood trailing down the side of his face, he finally stops. Behind him, Aizest slowly slides her sword back into its sheath with a loud, echoing click. Desire lifts his head toward the sky, grass floating through the air around him as the calm settles in. A moment later, the announcer's voice rings out. Shadow World cleared. Back at the teachers' gathering, several instructors instructors dressed in blue robes fill the room, some seated around a large table, others standing nearby. A red-haired man with gold earrings sits with a deep frown on his face. Across from him, an older man with a long beard stares forward seriously. In the middle of the table, a glowing orb projects holograms, while quiet conversations buzz around the room. One professor remarks that, as usual, nothing has really changed this year. Another glances over and comments that, once again, not a single commoner has made it into the Alpha class. A man with neatly combed hair closes his eyes and rests a hand on his chin, calmly stating that it's no surprise. Alpha class is meant for nobles. Without a solid education, commoners simply don't belong there. Another teacher nearby nods in agreement, saying he feels the exact same way. Bridget quietly traces the rim of her glass with one finger, saying nothing as the others speak. The professor with green hair watches with a faint smile, seated beside a colleague whose stern expression adds tension to the room. Another instructor comments with a smirk that commoners should feel privileged just to be admitted to the academy at all. Suddenly, the head of the faculty strikes his gavel against the wooden block, cutting through the chatter and demanding silence. Sitting tall in his chair, the senior professor, an imposing man with gray hair and a long braided beard, fixes his gaze forward. He calmly announces that there's still one final candidate to evaluate. A folder is placed on the table. The professor reads aloud. The applicant's name is Desir Herman, a magician of the first circle. A professor with a thick red beard glances over at the colleague beside him. The red-haired teacher mentions that the student in question was part of the same group as the Magic Knight. Another instructor raises an eyebrow in surprise, pointing out that the student is a commoner. A holographic image of Desir appears before the assembled professors, prompting two of them to gasp softly, their mouths slightly agape. The blue-haired teacher stares in disbelief, shocked that Desir managed to defeat Azest. The professor with orange earrings is equally stunned, struggling to comprehend how such a thing is even possible. Breaking the silence, the head professor asks in a calm but curious tone who recommended this student, pointing out that Desir arrived with a letter of endorsement. The room falls into silence as the professors exchange bewildered glances, clearly shocked that a commoner had been recommended at all. Bridget sits with her arms and legs crossed, a faint smile on her lips as she admits she was the one who recommended Desir. The head professor narrows his eyes at her and calmly asks why she did it. Bridget explains that Desir has been studying magic for years, and his hunger to learn keeps growing. She adds that he has both the determination and natural ability. With his hands folded, the head professor eyes her and asks what her connection is to the boy. Bridget replies that she first met him by chance at an orphanage. The head professor brings a finger to his lips, thinking for a moment. Then he lowers his hand and asks for Desir's preliminary evaluation. An assistant standing nearby replies that Desir is a first circle magician, and it looks like he only just reached that level. Pugman sneers and sarcastically asks if this is what Bridget considers talented. Bridget calmly lifts her finger, forming a small magical symbol in the air. With a smile, she asks if that's really how Pugman sees Desire, and then tells everyone to pay close attention. Waves of magical energy start swirling around the sphere. Bridget explains that everyone had assumed the Magic Knight would win, but now she asks them to watch a recording of the test. The video plays, showing Desire sprinting ahead, launching magical arrows. He speeds past Azest, kicking up a trail of dust behind him. Standing on the field, Desir lifts his head, injured and bleeding. The system announces that the shadow world has been cleared. A bearded professor's eyes go wide, his mouth slightly open in shock. The professor beside him, wearing glasses, adjusts them slowly, clearly amazed. He says he can't believe what he just saw. A bearded professor says it's the first time in his whole career he's seen something like this, especially done by a regular teenager. Another teacher with burgundy hair raises his hand, surprised, and says he never imagined using the grease spell that way. To him, it was always just a basic low-level spell. A purple-haired teacher chimes in, pointing out that Desir managed to alter the structure of magical algorithms directly. A teacher wearing dark glasses agrees, saying Desir has outstanding skill in analyzing magic. In the footage, Desir can be seen standing still, breathing heavily, his eyes squinting forward. The teacher with the glasses adds that Desir also has a sharp understanding of combat tactics and how to mess with his opponents mentally. His quick planning is on par with someone who spent their life as a war strategist. The room grows serious as the teachers discuss further. Many agree Desir should definitely be accepted. They question why he hasn't already been admitted to the academy. The head professor closes his eyes, resting his hands together, and calmly announces that Professor Bridget is requesting Desir be placed in the Alpha class. Hearing this, Pugman grits his teeth in frustration and shoots a sharp glare at her. In his mind, he believes Bridget is just pulling another one of her usual tricks, something she seems to try every year. Meanwhile, Bridget remains seated calmly, legs crossed, pretending not to be bothered. Pugman suddenly bursts out angrily, saying their academy has clear rules. Class placement is based on ability. To be an Alpha, a student must be at least a second circle magician. With a scowl on his face, Pugman demands to know what a first circle student would even do in a class full of higher-ranked magicians. He adds that if Desir is accepted, it sets a bad example, like anyone could just walk into Alpha without meeting the standards. Two other professors nod in agreement. One says he backs Pugman's point, insisting rules are there for a reason. The other adds that someone at Desir's level simply doesn't belong in the top class. Pugman smirks and shoots a sideways glance at Bridget, silently vowing not to let her win this time. But Bridget cuts in, clearly amused. confused. She says she can't believe how out of touch he is, and jokes that he never fails to surprise her. That pushes Pugman over the edge. He jumps up, face red with anger, and demands to know what she means. Bridget keeps her cool and points out that if Desire beat a third circle magic knight, calling him unworthy just because he's a first circle magician is ridiculous. She tells Pugman to stop hiding behind excuses. Her eyes narrow as she accuses him of having a personal reason for opposing Desire, that he's doing it simply because Desire is a commoner. Pugman's face twists with fury. He bares his teeth and yells at Bridget, asking how she could accuse him of such a thing. The head professor bangs his gavel on the table, calling for order. Sitting sternly, he tells everyone to stop bickering and says he's heard enough. To settle the matter, he proposes a vote. Pugman sits back down, folding his arms tightly. The head professor then instructs the faculty to raise their hands if they believe Desire should be placed in the Alpha class. Bridget sits quietly, waiting for the final decision. She stays composed as the head professor announces that it's time to decide which class Desire will be placed in. Outside, the sky is clear and the sun shines brightly over the academy. Inside, students crowd around the results board. A list with the names of the students accepted into the Alpha class is posted on the wall. Excited chatter fills the room as students congratulate each other, many bragging about the noble families they belong to. Nearby, another list shows the names of those placed into the Beta class. The students standing there speak in hushed voices. Some say they're just happy to have gotten in, but their expressions show disappointment. Deep down, they know that as commoners, this is all they were ever expected to achieve. In the middle of the students stands Desire, head held high and arms relaxed at his sides. He looks calm, thinking that everything turned out just as he expected. His name is listed under the Beta class. Crossing his arms, he glances off to the side, already planning his next steps now that the entrance exam is over. Suddenly, loud shouting grabs his attention. He turns to see Romantica yelling at the Beta class students, calling them arrogant and telling them to move aside. But then she suddenly stops. Her eyes widen in disbelief. There on the Beta class board, both Desire Herman and Romantica Eru's names are clearly written. Romantica didn't make it into the elite Alpha class. She's been placed with the commoners. Leaning forward, she clenches her fists, her face filled with shock and frustration. Sunlight streams through the academy's windows, casting light into the dim hallway. Inside the classroom, students sit quietly, eyes on the teacher. Romantica looks around and frowns. The room is old and gloomy. Dust coats everything, and cobwebs stretch between the windows. She wrinkles her nose in disgust. The place even smells bad. Letting out a deep sigh, she slumps in her seat, eyes half closed and mouth slightly open. Everything about this class feels wrong. It's depressing. Her eyes start to sting as tears well up. It's just too much, even for the Beta class. Romantica silently complains that the lessons are dull, the classroom is awful, and the teachers don't seem to know anything important. She's never even heard of this professor before. Biting her pencil in frustration, she thinks back to the entrance exam. She knew this is what failure would look like. Desire sits quietly, pencil in hand, focused on writing in his notebook. Romantica, seated nearby, stares in frustration. She clenches her fist and leans over her desk, unable to understand how things turned out like this. Why is she in the same class as him? She scowls at Desire, annoyed that he's actually paying attention and taking notes seriously. Her thoughts drift back to Azes during the exam. Did Desire really defeat her? If so, why is he stuck in the Beta class? Romantica narrows her eyes, watching him closely. There's no doubt, his skills are real, and that only makes him more irritating. Her intense gaze makes Desire glance up at her and offer a faint smile. That sets her off. She slams her fist on the desk in anger. The teacher pauses and looks in their direction, asking what's going on. Desire turns forward, his expression calm but serious. He knows the truth. No matter how gifted a person is, if they're a commoner, they'll always be pushed into the Beta class. That's the harsh reality. And because of it, many talented individuals will be overlooked, their potential wasted. Desire reflects on the past. If the academy had been fair, so many lives could have been saved. If things stay the same, people will die again. He makes up his mind. The Beta class is full of skilled people, and if he wants to change the future, he must raise them. Train them until they're on equal footing with the Alpha class. Just as Desire is lost in thought, trying to figure out how to change things, Romantica lets out a loud sigh that breaks his focus. Most of the students have already left. Class is over. She grumbles to herself, clearly upset, saying she still can't believe she ended up in the Beta class. At that moment, a gray-haired boy walks up to her and asks if she's the daughter of Baron ERU. Romantica glances at him and asks who he is. Before he can answer, two students standing behind him jump in, scolding her for speaking so casually when she's just a Beta class student. Romantica frowns in confusion, surprised by their reaction. As the two continue to speak down to her, the gray-haired boy holds up a hand, stopping them. He turns back to Romantica and says it's his fault, then politely apologizes. He introduces himself as Donovan Hound, a first-year student like her. He explains that he's putting together a party and is currently recruiting members. Romantica doesn't move from her seat. She stays slouched over the desk and tells him flatly that she hopes he finds people who meet his standards. Donovan flashes a broad smile and says that's exactly why he's here. Romantica lifts her head, meeting his gaze with a blank expression. She asks him directly what he wants from her. Some Beta class students watch the exchange from their seats, confused as to why students from the Alpha class would bother coming to their side of the academy. Desire is among them, silently observing through the classroom window. He sees Donovan and two others standing in front of Romantica, who remains seated. Desire watches with a thoughtful expression, guessing guessing they're already trying to recruit her. Absent-mindedly, his fingers brush over the folded paper in his pocket as he considers his next move. Donovan wrinkles his nose and lowers his brow, shielding his face with a finger as he scowls. He says it's shameful that someone of noble birth like Romantica was placed in a low-tier beta class. The beta students turn away, their faces heavy with disappointment. Donovan casts a cold glance at them, calling them worthless commoners. Romantica forces a stiff smile and replies, "So what?" even though his words sting deeply. Desire stands quietly behind the group, watching the moment unfold with a focused gaze. The other beta students look on, confused and unsure how to react. Donovan tells Romantica he'll get straight to the point. With her arms folded, Romantica watches as he extends a hand and asks if she's familiar with the group led by Alheim Sunbai. He explains it's called the Blue Moon Party and mentions he's recently been accepted into it. Now, he's here to invite her, saying her magical talent is impressive, on par with his own. Romantica looks taken aback and starts to respond, "You mean the Blue Moon Party?" But Donovan cuts her off with a smug grin, raising his hand proudly. He tells her it's the top-ranked group at the academy, made up entirely of elite students from the Alpha class. Romantica presses her lips together and frowns, staring seriously at the table as she thinks. She assumes Azest, the swordswoman, is likely already part of the group, and joining it could be her best shot at getting into the Alpha class. This might be her only way out of the Beta class. She closes her eyes, confused about why she's still unsure, because deep down, the choice seems obvious. Opening her eyes, she asks Donovan, "If I join your party, what do I get out of it?" Desir watches the moment unfold with a focused expression. Suddenly, Donovan grabs Romantica's hand and leans closer, flashing a sly grin. He says, "You'll be my girlfriend." Donovan gives a sly grin, showing his teeth as he meets Romantica's shocked eyes. She looks at him in disbelief, clearly stunned by what he just said. Calmly, he says it again. He wants her to be his girlfriend. Romantica blinks, confused, and asks if they've even met before. Donovan grins confidently and says he saw her during the entrance ceremony before the test and fell for her right away. Romantica gently pulls her hand out of his, a slight blush appearing on her cheeks. Holding her hands to her chest, she looks down and quietly asks for a little time to think it over. Donovan, still grinning with his eyes closed, says that of course she can have time. He's a gentleman after all. He leans forward a bit and rests his hand on the desk in front of her. Then, like he just remembered something, he says there's one more thing. Romantica watches with wide eyes as he reaches into his coat and pulls out something unusual, a wooden dagger with a smooth, pale finish. He holds it out and asks her to take it. In his kingdom, he explains, giving a decorative dagger is a way to show admiration. Donovan turns the dagger so the handle faces her. Placing a finger on it, he says there's something inside. With a small twist, he opens it, revealing a hidden gold chain. Romantica gasps, clearly surprised. Donovan carefully takes out the chain and offers it to her as a sign that he's being serious. Romantica quickly shakes her head, saying it's too much and that she can't accept something like that. But Donovan takes her hand, presses the chain into it, and then walks off confidently. As he leaves with his two classmates, he throws a cold glance at the others and mutters, "Commoners." Romantica looks down at her palm, staring at the gold chain. Her eyes narrow with discomfort as the shiny metal glints in the light. Just then, a shadow falls over her. It's Desire. He comments that she's gotten pretty popular today. Surprised, Romantica jumps, and the chain slips from her hand. A few beta students glance over at the noise. In her panic, she falls out of her chair, hitting the floor and rubbing her head. Desire leans forward slightly and closes his eyes. He jokes dryly that it's nice to see how excited she is to see him. Romantica shoots him a glare, cheeks flushed. She says she wasn't happy, just startled. Desire smirks and holds out a hand to help her up. Her face turns even redder. She looks at him for a moment, annoyed, then refuses the help. She gets up on her own, brushes herself off, and pushes her chair back. Desire watches quietly. Romantica crosses her arms and demands to know why he's here. Clenching her jaw, she waits for his answer. With a serious look, Desire says he came to make the same offer Donovan did. Romantica stiffens, folding her arms tighter across her chest. Her expression turns cold. She says flatly that she'd never date someone like him. Desire calmly tells her she's got it wrong. He's not here to ask her out. Romantica lets out a heavy sigh, rests her arms on the desk, and lays her head down. She's clearly not in the mood to talk. Desire watches her in silence, his lips parting slightly as if about to say something. He asks what's wrong. She slowly lifts her head and gives him an annoyed look. Then she raises her hand and shows him the gold chain Donovan gave her. Desire's eyes widen in shock. Clutching the chain tightly, Romantica asks him which he would pick, an elite alpha class party or a beta party started by someone nobody knows. Desire's expression darkens. A sharp look appears in his eyes. He realizes she's already made up her mind, and getting her to change it won't be easy. But deep down, he knows her choice could bring trouble later on. He lifts his arm slightly and lets out a long sigh, then says there's probably nothing more he can do. Romantica mumbles that he's right and tells him to just leave her alone. Desire calmly slips a hand into his pocket and asks if she can take a look at something. Romantica blinks, confused, unsure of what he means. Without saying more, Desire places a small envelope on her desk. Romantica picks it up slowly, puzzled. It looks old-fashioned. People don't send letters like this anymore. She turns it over, still unsure what to think. Desire says plainly that if she's not interested, she can just throw it away. But inside is something important, something personal to her. Her eyes widen in shock as she stares at him, frozen. She quickly rips the envelope open and begins reading. As she scans the letter, her expression darkens. Her hands tighten around the paper, disbelief and anger rising as she takes in the words. Desire watches her without showing much emotion. He asks if she's ready to talk now. Romantica suddenly stands up and slams her hands on the desk. The other students turn to look, startled by the noise. Desire stays calm, unbothered. He tells her not to make a scene. This is something he'd rather keep between the two of them. Romantica lowers her eyes, staring hard at the desk. Her mind spins. How could he possibly know this? Before she can even ask, Desire responds like he already read her thoughts. He says he doesn't need to explain. She already knows. Deep down, she understands why she ended up in the beta class.